Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for a webinar on the future of enterprise analytics, what AI changes and what it doesn't. This is a topic I've been thinking about and talking about a lot recently because there are so many predictions being made about where analytics is headed. Dashboards are dead, AI will replace analysts, and everything will become conversational, right? That's what we hear. Agents will completely change how we work with data. So, some of that I'm saying a bit with tongue in cheek because there's where we're going and then there's reality, which we're going to go through today. But there's clearly a major shift happening. There's a lot happening on the ground, and there's a lot to learn from all that. It's very interested and nuanced. It's very interesting and nuanced, and more than just like blanket predictions. So today we're going to dig into what AI is actually changing about enterprise analytics, what isn't going anywhere soon, at least, and what data leaders should be thinking about over the next 6 to 12 months. The funny thing is, initially we thought, what should data leaders think about for the next 3 to 5 years? But who knows what's going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years? So let's focus on the next 6 to 12 months. I'm excited to be joined by two great guests for this conversation. The first one is Gilad Lotan, is a leader in AI, data science, and analytics with extensive experience building and leading data and AI organizations, most recently at BuzzFeed. Hi, Gilad. Thank you for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Also, I have Rob Broesler, VP of Analytics at Foodsmart, bringing the perspective of a data leader actively navigating how analytics and AI are evolving inside an organization today. Hi, Rob. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Those who don't know me, my name is Yoni Leitersdorf, co-founder and CEO of Solid. We spend a lot of our time thinking about what happens when enterprises try to bring AI into real-world data and analytics environments. So I'm looking forward to getting both Gilad's and Rob's perspectives today. Also, feel free to ask any questions that you want in the Zoom here. We're going to weave some of them into the conversation. Some of them we're going to save to the end and answer towards the end. So feel free to just submit your questions as we go. Gilad and Rob, thank you for joining us, for joining me and joining us. And let's jump in. So let's start easy. AI has obviously changed the conversation around analytics. From each of your perspectives, what's changed the most about the way enterprises think about analytics since generative AI entered the picture? Just let's start there. I'll start with Rob.
I think the biggest thing is self-service feels real for the first time in my career. I think we built so many dashboards and different versions of things to get people to access data on their own, and often they just download to Excel and explore that way. But seeing kind of like broad engagement with data via AI and having that like real self-service moment is definitely like has been really eye-opening for me. And there's that higher expectation from stakeholders and leadership that that's possible and that we're doing it. And yeah, I just think that engagement is really different.
So we've been talking about self-serve for decades, and finally it's actually happening. I think one of the challenges was always you're building self-serve, but is the horse coming to the trough? Like, are they coming and using it? So other than the enablement of self-serve, do you feel like your users are behaving differently?
I think the interface is really natural. I think we've all been using the chat interface, whether it's like talking to our friends and now to like, AI, ChatGPT, Claude. And so I think having that interface for folks, or even like slacking an analyst, right? Like, hey, let me Slack this person and ask a question. So I think that interface is really familiar for people and how they work with data teams and also just in life. And so it does feel really different and a lot easier to get adoption without like as much training or enablement as you might need with like a classic BI approach.
I think it comes off as very confident to its detriment until it sees some pushback and then it kind of dials back. But I think that's one of the I guess the pieces that's helping with enablement and adoption is these systems are pretty confident in their responses, and that's stakeholders like it's compelling to ping someone or something and get like a confident answer back, which is what you'd want from an analyst. It obviously introduces many issues, which I suspect we'll talk about, but I think that's partly why we're seeing this pretty huge adoption in self-serve data and analytics, which I think is exciting, very, very exciting, because it's what we've wanted to, it's been our effectively North Star for so many years, and it's been hard to achieve. But it comes with many, many issues and complex problems to solve.
Do you
It's like
feel
confident and near instant, right? Like I think like you Slack your analyst and then they're like, okay, in 2 weeks I'll get back to you. Which teams are busy, it's hard. And so yeah, it's confident and it's like near instant, which is satisfying, but yeah, that is not without risk.
do you feel that the data team, the business team's expectation of the data team has changed as well? Like, now that it's so readily available, are they expecting something different than they did before?
I mean, I think teams have always wanted faster answers, right? I think part of what a data team does is kind of set expectations, especially sort of understand both kind of what is not possible to answer and what is more harder, what takes more time. And I think these systems are responding very fast, sometimes with wrong information, sometimes many times with the right information. So I do think the expectation with this new type of interaction model in UI is that responses happen faster.
And so, both of you guys are very experienced in this space. So expectations have gone up. People are expecting quick answers. Hallucinations are an issue. If you were, advising a head of analytics, a VP of analytics on where they should focus their effort right now, where would be one or two areas that you would have them start?
Um, I could start, Rob, but feel
Please, yeah,
free to
yeah,
jump
I'll chime
in.
in.
So I would say I think there are a handful of maybe like 50 to 60% of the analytics work is known, right? So known metrics, kind of known reports, known strategies, right? Teams need data in their day-to-day to make decisions, to understand trends, to see where things are going. So it's pretty tactical work. And for that and that a lot of that effort can be mostly automated with agents now. And so if kind of you have very clear definitions for the core metrics, their data sources, you can kind of set up various types of analyses and reports and comparable metrics, right? And create summaries and these tools are really flexible and have pretty incredible capabilities to create nuanced analyses with these very kind of known within these known spaces. So they could send summaries to Slack or create kind of views of certain metrics and send it to the people who care about them. I'd say that sort of that space should be the focus of many teams for automation and would be the first place for teams to really like take that work off of the plates of the analytics teams. I would say the spaces where there's more exploratory work, more experimental, new metrics or new business areas, or more complex questions around user retention or kind of multi-step kind of analyses. I would say certainly leave that for future steps. But there's a lot of kind of automation to be handled and done for that first part.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I think taking those 50 or 60% of questions that are just like the quick things that come in rapid fire and create a lot of noise for the data team, being able to have those metrics well modeled, we can use the buzzwords of semantic layer and context, et cetera, but those are real things that help a ton. Having a consistent way that you're defining those metrics, helping AI know what those fields actually mean. Don't just leave it to the column name. Don't leave it to figure out the joins, right? Like define that in the system. And we found like, and then having that feedback loop, because you get someone asks a question, they'll share it and say, hey, is this right or not? And then you can have that feedback loop of if it's not, make sure that you're always improving the system. So adding more context or changing things around to make sure it gets it right the next time.
Okay, so it's and I just audience, just so you know, I didn't pay Rob to talk about semantic layers here. Uh, okay, so you start from sort of the knowns, the metrics that are better defined. You build some semantics around it. Gilad, one of the things you said is, they start from that, and then for the deeper analysis, they sort of branch off, and maybe there's a human involved. Have you seen a behavior that works well in that sense? So imagine marketing leader goes in and says, I want to know how campaign X performed last month. And maybe that's well managed in the semantic layer and so forth. They get the answer and they say, okay, now I want to take that and do a deeper analysis and they start asking follow-up questions. Have you seen a good way to do the handoff from the automated agentic response to, okay, you're asking something complicated, let's help you and bring an analyst maybe into the picture?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a clear kind of framework. I think we've seen a few examples where it's worked decently well. But I think like if we think about kind of the new types of infrastructure that analytics teams need to work on, there are a set of skills that have to be effectively, it's beneficial for analytics teams to have kind of to be working on, to iterate on, to have kind of a centralized repo of skills that are being built and leveraged by agents. One set of skills around kind of knowledge of the data, right? The semantics, the like routing. So if there are questions, where should I go to figure out like how to even access like which data set, how to query it, etc. So a set of skills around that, and then a set of skills that are more of kind of process or runbook style skills. Like, okay, so how do I clarify when someone's asking me about revenue? I work in media, really complicated business. When you ask like programmatic revenue, it's actually like there are then 10 questions you have to ask specifically to get to the right type of revenue figure. So clarifying questions, finding, the specific sources, running queries. And so I do think like iterating on these skills, and that takes obviously work from the analytics teams to help kind of guide and update these skills. So I would say for queries that are more experimental or multi-step queries have leveraged these knowledge base of routing and the kind of runbook style skills, but initially have team members run with it and kind of build up these capabilities.
So,
Um,
so the skills are
oh,
initially built by the analytics team, used by the analytics team, but then
and
afterwards
updated as
stated by,
these examples surface.
and over time they start actually embedding it maybe into the agent, and then the agent can do better clarification, but also say, oh, this is a thing that I need to pull, John into.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it. Rob, how about your experience on this?
I think the best stakeholder partnership, the stakeholder goes as far as they can and gets some understanding of their question, right? They don't just come in and say, help me answer this vague business concept, right? They're looking at the dashboard or they're like using their own like data they have from their team. I think with chat-based interfaces, they can go further. And it's really shareable because you can see their actual thought process. Like it's really hard to know what someone does in a dashboard, right? But
Yeah.
I find that like whenever someone has a question, like, "Hey, I got this thing. Is it right or not?" Or like, "Can you help me?" They can share the actual chat thread, and I can see all the questions they asked and their responses, which lets me pressure test the response, but also like get a deeper understanding of what their real question is. Because so often when a stakeholder comes, you kind of ask them those five questions of like, "What are you actually trying to do?" Right? And so I do think you can get more of that from the chat itself, and then there's a branch off of like, okay, is this complicated enough that we should pull in an analyst to run with it? Or is there just a limitation in this like semantics or metrics we have defined and can we just add more context or a new field to make that self-serviceable? And so I think there's those branches of do we take it over? Do we take it over for now? Do we just enable this like immediately? And that just comes down to those specific scenario.
Okay. So analysts are not going anywhere yet. Everything's yet because nobody knows. But analysts are building the semantics for the basic stuff or for the core things. Analysts are codifying skills. Analysts are reviewing responses that are sent to them by the business user for validation and improvement and so forth. So analysts, instead of analysts answering the same question for the 17th time, they instead become enablers of this experience for business users, and over time they can cover more and more, and they handle the more of the edges, right? So okay, so that makes sense. Now, what we've been talking about over the last 10 minutes or so is more chat with your data, right? So people go in, ask a question, get an answer, and so forth. What we're also seeing is the rise of agents that are either working on a schedule or they're trying to do some other work, and then data is part of what they need. So, for example, one of Solid's customers built an agent that helps customer success managers identify what they need to do with their customers. So every Monday morning, wakes up, goes through the full account list for the enterprise accounts. Per account, analyzes the account's status, health, recent issues, support cases, product usage, all that stuff. And then it goes to the CSM and says, here's a list of accounts you need to action this week, and this is what you need to do with each of them. So instead of the CSM going in and saying, hey, what is the ARR of Acme Corp? Instead, the agent pushes it over to the CSM, and then the CSM can actually ask more questions, and then it evolves into a chat. So the trigger is a bit different, the value a bit different. Are you starting to see that common as well, or is it, just too early for that, or what are you guys seeing?
I'll start, which is like candidly for us, it's a little, we're not quite there yet. It's like on my radar, like the tools we use have that capability built in. But Foodsmart's earlier stage, small team, it's really like establishing the confidence in our metrics and semantics and kind of making sure we have that full breadth of coverage is my focus and driving adoption and accuracy of the tools. So I think that's still my primary focus. There are use cases where I see that recurring like automated prompts useful, but yeah, I would say like I'm not quite there yet personally, candidly.
Do you, do you think is it, a clear sort of next step, or is it, we need to think about it more? Like, would you characterize it?
I mean, it's going to maybe the subtitle of this webinar, but I'm kind of like shifting some focus back to building dashboards and consistent views for folks to like have that pulse of the business. So that's maybe a whole other thread in this conversation. But I'm spending a little more time there using AI agents to build the dashboard, right? So my team isn't going through and building every pixel, but yeah, that's what I've been feeling lately.
Yeah, one of the coming topics on this webinar is going to be our dashboard. So stay tuned. Uh, Gilad, how about you? Have you seen, the other sort of that agentic driven data usage yet, or not?
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because it's effectively the next step after someone views a dashboard, right? So in the data process, you store data, you set it up, you wrangle it, you put together a view, like a dashboard or some way to view and understand the trends. And then typically a stakeholder would go to this place, look at the trends, and then take some action, right? CSM would look at whatever interactions relating to the clients, and then come up with a recommendation and take an action, right? And so I think what we're seeing is that with if agents are set up a certain way, they could be proactive and not just passive. So they're not just serving a trend, but they're also, especially if the run book, so the skills are detailing what examples or what they should be doing. They kind of try to take the next step or at least make a set of recommendations. So specifically, what I saw at BuzzFeed when we work closely with the growth team and the audience development teams who are very kind of close to audience trends and traffic and kind of understanding where's traffic coming from, what are the top articles, like what are their top referring sites, et cetera. And that those trends change quite often and quite frequently, and some are under our control, some are exogenous. And so what's really great about setting up these agents, they can both kind of query the data, put together kind of an analysis and showcase the trends, but also come up with a set of recommendations, like promote this story to Apple News, Look at, your Google keywords and maybe think about these three keywords to run a campaign. And right, so especially if you're kind of listing out kind of this playbook of the audience team, what they care about, these skills and agents can surface these recommendations at the right time based on the data. So it's kind of like the next step after the dashboard, right? And it's done automatically at this point.
Yeah, the magic is there. I'm viewing the chat as you're talking. Susie said something that was interesting. So she said, okay, let's say you do all that. So you have the agents, they're proactive, they're telling you, oh, your piece, you should promote it here, etc. How do you enable the consumers of that to work with it correctly? So for example, imagine there is, the receiver of that recommendation. How do you enable them? How do you help them understand what they're getting now and what they should do with it? And how do you not flood them? Susie said here, you might have too much data and that might be
Yeah,
dangerous. So how do you
yeah,
handle that?
yeah, totally. Very valid point. I think the fact that, the marginal cost of producing an analysis now is like zero, right? So
Yeah.
there's a few tokens, right? Cost us some tokens. And definitely there's huge risk in flooding stakeholders with these like, look at this huge dashboard, look at all these trends. And so I think that's a fair point. And like it takes a lot of work to make sure you're summarizing, you're only sharing important trends. I think that's part of this kind of iterative skill development work where you're detailing kind of your philosophy, like you're showing examples. What's actually an anomaly? What is a trend that is worth highlighting in Slack to the leader of a team or to the senior stakeholder, and what is not worth highlighting. Right, but that takes a lot of it comes to experience, taste, and the analyst has to kind of work on that, right?
I think you need that partnership from the stakeholder too, right? If like we go off and do all this agentic work and deliver insights that the team doesn't want, right? Or it's too noisy, you need that feedback loop and you need the partnership with the stakeholder, no matter what you're building. And I think it's even more important when it's that like proactive build.
I think I will say from our experience at Solid, one of the questions I always ask in the beginning when we talk to, potential customers, I say, are the business stakeholders in with you on this? Are you building on your own and then you're just going to shove it over to them? Or is there partnership from that side? Usually the answer is yes, by the way. Usually the answer is, well, actually, the business came to us and wanted this because there's ChatGPT out there and all that, and they want something like that here. But to your point, Rob, it's really important to have that partnership, right? So that you're delivering something that is useful to them, and also you're able to enable them, and so forth. So okay, one last question. I think I'm also monitoring the Q&A here. One last question before we switch to another topic here, a related topic. If every department starts building its own agents, how do you prevent basically a mess, right? So are data teams still responsible for the final truth, for making sure that everything's pulled correctly, the data is used correctly, etc.? Is that still what we're all pulling towards, or is it some other approach? How do we deal with this?
One of the issues we're finding ourselves, or one of the problems is, I think Yoni, you mentioned it earlier in the call, that a stakeholder runs some analyses and then like sends it over to an analyst. You're like, can you check this work? Or like, is this legit? Right. And so increasingly, so we have self-serve, which is great, and then like enablement strong, but then trust in data is questionable, right? So stakeholders are getting all these answers and they're maybe not always sure the trends are legitimate. So then send over to analysts. The analysts have to kind of figure out what they did, what their prompt was, recreate the work. And so it can become a huge time sink and really hard to check the work. Right. So I think that's one of the friction points. where I know like a space that's really important. I know a bunch of startups working in the space is really observability. So how do we how do we build up the right capabilities to log um, what's
Hmm.
happening, but also to understand what kind of questions people are asking, stakeholders are asking, because in the past, I guess not so distant past, analytics teams would have like a queue or would get like Slack notes or they'd be able to have a pulse on like what the org cares about. And through these inbound questions, the infrastructure would be adjusted. Okay, if there are more and more questions about programmatic revenue, we know we need to like adjust our our data models to support these questions because we see where the business is heading. Without being able to see, without that visibility, you're sort of acting blind. And so I do think that that is one of the biggest pieces that has to be figured out. And I'm not sure. I think most teams don't have that piece in place. We certainly didn't.
I can share what we've seen. Sometimes people either in the skill file, they'll ask the agent to log it somewhere, or in the MCP definition. So they'll build like an MCP bridge between Cloud Desktop and whatever's on the back end. And then in that MCP, they'll say, okay, when you're asking me for something, I also want you to explain why you're asking for it. Like, what are you actually looking for here? So it's a way to grab it. The downside of it is that you might get information you're not supposed to. So, for example, let's say there's a massive riff and some VP is asking questions, that they don't want people to know that
Yeah.
they're asking these questions. But now the agent tells all and it gets saved in some database and some analyst sees this. So it's
Like
not
team salaries.
exactly. Yeah. So it's not a
Yeah.
foolproof solution, but the
Yeah.
point about observability, we start seeing it coming up more and more. So putting observability into Cloud Desktop, ChatGPT, whatever agentic experience you're using is challenging from privacy and other reasons. But as you're saying, Gilad, the flip side is we as a data team, analytics team, we can't see what people are asking and why they're asking and what they're trying to do because the Jira tickets are gone. So the balance there is tricky.
And also, when we do log in and have the observability, there is like a deeper understanding, I think, than you can get just from Jira tickets at times, right? So it's a problem we need to solve, but I think it's one that can get us in a better place. And we do have some observability, and I haven't had the like super sensitive, scenarios you're talking about, but when I tell people that I can like see their questions, they do get a little like there is like an invasion of privacy feeling. They're like, oh, like. And there's like maybe if they're not that data savvy and it's coming from the analytics leader, they kind of get a little embarrassed almost that they might be judged or something negative. And of course, that's not my mindset, but you can even feel in that funny example, people like bristling a little bit, even though it's a really powerful way to make the entire system better. But I do think what's important is that if people are building agents or having their own analysis, it's done off a centralized semantic layer again, not trying to like it should be from one place, right? Because if you have independent definitions, whether it's in a spreadsheet or an AI agent, like you can't have a common language, you can't really make decisions together. And so I do think that centralized platform is super important, even if people are plugging in their own tools from an MPC connectors or otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. Okay. Switching a bit gears here. So our dashboard's dead. I even saw a post yesterday where BI companies, we would all call them BI companies, are saying we're not BI companies. Because being BI is not a good thing in 2026. So our dashboard's dead. Rob, maybe over to you because you talked about building dashboards using agents. So let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, my answer is no. Dashboards aren't dead. When I joined Foodsmart a little over a year ago, we were pretty like nascent in our like infrastructure, just like there wasn't a lot of reporting. We picked up a BI tool, kind of built from scratch for a bunch of reasons, um, and like AI was available through all of that. And so I could feel that we over rotated towards AI chat. And the like most obvious example to me is we have a weekly business review for the executive team where we're looking at the same metrics time and again, and we need commentary and insights. And my main stakeholder teams were just like going to chat and asking for the same tables and the same, charts over and over again, which I'm sure is like wasting tokens, but also like each time the format's a little different and we group clients in certain ways and those groupings weren't always the same depending on how they would prompt it. And so We made the context better, so when they ask those questions, it would be more repetitive, but also just like used an AI, you know, agent built into our BI tool to build a really nice dashboard that looks at all of the key metrics in the same way, like the exact same plot for every metric. And there's something really powerful to understand the system, to see the data and to see the trends. And then you use AI, either scheduled or ad hoc to ask questions like, why is this metric down or up? And then you can pull the thread on what's happening, but there's real power in just seeing things over and over again in the same way for a business leader to actually understand the business and build that intuition to know what to ask.
Are you seeing less dashboards as a result? So would you say the amount is lesser?
I'll answer quickly and then I don't want to keep talking, give you time to lie too. But yeah, I think like there's a proliferation of like every possible use case needed a dashboard, right? Like every follow-on question resulted in another dashboard. I think now it's more dashboards are the launching pad, right? So you've got these smaller number of canonical dashboards that then have, AI built into it. So if you want to ask the follow-on questions or probe deeper, that can be done by the stakeholder. But I think it becomes like a starting place. So yeah, I definitely think fewer dashboards.
Gilad, what do you think?
I think BI is going away. Honestly, like I don't know how teams can justify the cost of BI, but I would say I think we'll have like an explosion of dashboards, but perhaps not no BI. And so I'll explain what I mean by this. I think the idea of like a stable container sort of underneath a dashboard, right? In a BI tool, you have all these definitions, you have like ways to calculate various metrics and various choices around like comparisons, like single day, 7 days, 30 days, quarter over quarter, like all these decisions that the team has kind of curated. That container is really important, but it doesn't necessarily need to be encoded within a BI tool, right? And I'd say we did everything by the book. We kind of set up the platform, like built all this amazing BI infrastructure and heavily documented, like all the fields are documented, and still most stakeholders are afraid to use those tools. There are too many choices. They don't necessarily know if they're going to the right place. So most, if not the majority of dashboards are ultimately created by analysts, which was not kind of I guess it wasn't the vision for BI that we were sold, or that we like, it wasn't what we had envisioned, right? So I would say having some whatever, like having some container with the definitions. But I'd say what's so cool about this new ecosystem is that regardless which LLM you're using, which access point, you can create personalized views of these dashboards. And I second what Rob mentioned about kind of consistency. That's so critical. But I think there are other ways to ensure consistency, like kind of various ways to run validations, or even kind of having consistent SQL queries that are always run, right, against the warehouse. That's a way to get kind of the exact same data back for the dashboard. So I do think what's cool about the tools, and I've seen it firsthand, is you can create different nuanced views of data that's accessible to non-technical users. These tools are flexible in how they're showcasing trends. They can decide if to show a 3 day moving average, 7 day moving average, like, week over week trend, right? And so I think they're really powerful in the way they display data. And so we'll have more of these views of data, but not necessarily like BI dashboards.
I feel like it depends on what you define as BI. Maybe get into like the semantics of it, but like
Yeah,
you need
let's do
access
that.
control, you need metric definitions, you need context, you need like reproducibility. And I think you need a shared sense of truth at a company. And so I think if it's really powerful for ad hoc analysis to have personalized dashboards, right? Maybe disposable dashboards that you look at and you don't come back to. But I think if everyone at the company has their own way of monitoring what's going on, then you don't have a shared sense of truth. And so I do think there is a balance of how much you still centralize like the most important things and look at it the same way, versus while still enabling the deep dives, the like self-service. the like rapid decision making that you can get with AI. So I think there's a balance there. And to me, like I don't know, you call it what you will, but like something needs to house that shared sense of truth and how you look at the business from a data standpoint. And so maybe that's not a BI tool, but like it feels like a BI tool still to me. Maybe you have different interfaces on top of it, but you still need to make sure that only certain people have that. And we have very sensitive data, right? I'm sure you do too, but with healthcare data, like it's super important that that's done thoughtfully. And I, lean on the BI tool and the, other
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, no, totally agree. So I think that that's a place where like access control is where BI, solves that problem. I don't know necessarily how to do that purely through LLMs and kind of skill management.
Yeah,
I
unless
don't
like
think
the
there's a
LLM,
solution out there.
LM builds it themselves. They would have to build that in some way, right? It would have to become part of that
I
product. And
guess, yeah,
I
or
wouldn't want to build it.
some layer, but that's what BI does, right?
Yeah.
It handles the access. So I do think, yeah, I think that's a great point, the access controls. But I think the shared kind of understanding for a company, you don't necessarily need a dashboard for that. If you have a set of queries, like SQL can encode whatever these figures are, like total, like monthly active users or whatever, total revenue for a certain kind of revenue, you can just kind of run them and then send out updates. So maybe it's a bit of a different because I don't know, like what do we call a dashboard if a Slack update with these numbers that's sent to the executive team, is that a dashboard? Probably
Yeah.
not. But it effectively does the job
I mean,
that
the
a
way you're
dashboard would have done.
communicating information with numbers, right? I guess like a dashboard is a way you accomplish that, but so is an automated Slack update that has like,
I would say I think most people don't want to look at dashboards. It's like it takes effort. Like you
but
actually
I think
like
there's real value in the effort. Like I worry in stakeholders who just like take the answer from AI. Like, great, this is the driver, but there is a depth of understanding of the system that comes from some of that hard work, And
it's
so
like
I
eating
think
your
there's a
vegetables.
yeah, no, and I think that's real. Maybe I'm biased for my role, but there's a real benefit of doing some of the hard work to figure out why metrics are moving. And if you just get an answer in a Slack thread, and again, I don't think that has to be you clicking filters in a dashboard, but as the business leader, like you need to be accountable to what's happening in the system. And I don't know, I don't think you can offload that to an AI agent completely.
First of all, I love the
Yeah,
disagreement. You're representing the disagreement in the market, at least part of it. I think one of the interesting things is Gilad, one of the things you talked about in sort of the pre-talk to this webinar, you're like, okay, there's costs here. There's costs for the BI tool. There's costs of infrastructure to support the BI tool. What happens to those costs? Do they change? Because if everybody's got cloud desktop licenses, let's say in a company, do we really need to pay for a BI tool in addition to that? User, like a seat-based BI tool in addition to the $20-$30 a month we're paying for cloud? Or can we just build the dashboards as artifacts in cloud and share them? And then now we have dashboards, to Rob's point, but we're not paying for another BI tool. So maybe that's part of the distinction that you guys are making here. Am I getting that correctly?
yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think there's that piece that's a very real question, and I think if I were building like a data team from scratch or building a platform from scratch, that would be I'd ask myself, do we actually need this right now? Maybe not. I mean, there's access controls, but maybe that BI tools give you, but maybe there are other ways to solve that. Otherwise, you may not need like to pay for a tool like that. I think the other piece, it's harder for me to even think about, but I do think like increasingly warehouse costs, like we're locked into these warehouses, prices continue to increase. It's a lot of spend. Obviously, really, really important, and but increasingly there are other solutions that are cheaper that are out there, like DuckDB, for example, or various kind of smaller scale um, data warehouse solutions. So I think like many teams will start to ask like what is a necessary piece of our infrastructure and how do we save money on this on these tools.
there's actually a related point that I've heard someone that we work with. They rolled out a this chat with like on a go-to-market level. So all marketing and sales, et cetera. This is a big tech company. And they realized that the costs on the data warehouse just skyrocketed for two reasons. One was the AI generation of SQL. The other one is just normal compute, SQL compute. They're hitting the data warehouse, pulling data all the time. So that the cost side of that, is that something you guys have put some thought into, dealt with maybe, or not yet?
For me,
With
not yet. I think it's
Verizon.
more
Oh,
sorry, the like direct AI costs, right? I think like when starting with these, BI tools that we use, everyone wants us to use AI. It's great, it's impactful, and now they're feeling the cost burden, right? And they're passing that along to me. So for me, the past few months have been like I've got a couple tools and both. They're like, hey, you got to start paying for this, and then we're also paying for, our paying for Claude, there's AI cost there, and then each of these tools has costs, and so there's just this new thing to manage. So far those costs aren't outrageous, but it's like a new thing that I need to think about as a leader, and sort of we all need to train ourselves and train teams on like what model do you use and when, and just all those questions are another thing to figure out. Yeah, I'm sure I need to dig into the data warehouse cost, but that hasn't been the big thing yet for us.
yeah, we've been very closely monitoring warehouse costs, both kind of like token use on BigQuery in our case, both, have these large data sets that, first party, third party data sets. How often do we refresh our views? That's very costly. We have views, specifically for various services that use BigQuery, so we know exactly how much the BI tool costs in terms of use warehouse usage and every service that leverages the warehouse. So very closely monitoring it, and it's increasing, and the price is increasing. So and you're locked in. So and it's a critical piece of the infrastructure, but at some point it may not make sense to continue this.
Yeah.
I would
Um,
add for like my business, the business I work in is like infrequent and high revenue, right? It's like kind of the opposite from BuzzFeed, right? And it makes sense that you would feel that way more given the size of your data. I just like big data is not a thing that I think about, right? It's like PHI and HIPAA and those things are where I have costs. And from the compliance standpoint, our data is pretty small. So
yeah, it's different areas, different challenges. Um, let's talk people for a second. So, and there's a question here that I'm going to weave into this. But first of all, there was a research that was posted, I think, last week. I think it was Harvard Business Review, but I need to check. It was analyzing the impact on jobs by AI. It was separating between AI automation, so basically AI replacing human labor, versus augmentation, where AI is helping a human do their job. And as part of it, what they noticed is that the biggest impact is on the more junior people in the career. So people who are 22 to 25-year-old looking for computer science related jobs, customer service related jobs, financial analysis. So things that, as we know, Claude, et cetera, are getting really, really good at. So now I want to transfer that over to BI analysts. What's going to happen to them? Let's look at maybe two groups. Those who just finished the data analytics degree specialization in college, they're 22, looking for a job. And then maybe those who've been in the industry for a few years, and then, they're in their late 20s or even 30s, et cetera, and they're thinking about their impact. Any observations on that?
I can start. I mean, I do feel like more benefit from seniority lately because more of the work is a higher percentage of the work is like what should we be doing? How do we partner with stakeholders? How do we like deeply understand the business and translate that into the infrastructure and the questions that we ask? At the same time, I think for the earlier career folks, like being AI native is a real like power. And so I think that's the balance of, you know, for folks that are more established, you need to really have that growth mindset to like stay engaged and to force yourself to think about things differently. Um, And also like I think you get that a little more natively from folks that are junior, but I like personally have been like for my small team shifting like investing in more senior leaders on the team. I still think we'll hire and grow and hire more junior people, but I feel the importance of like stakeholder management and kind of depth of connection that I think is easier to find in people that have been doing the role for longer.
Yeah, it's an interesting point in time because the roles, what's expected of folks in roles, is changing really fast. And so I think given that these are changing, like more senior, more experienced folks are more amenable to these kind of situations. And what I'm seeing is, analysts in some cases are taking on effectively product roles. So they're like our product analysts are so close to the data and trends and users that they can, and then they have a good understanding of the product strategy, that they can effectively shape prioritization, kind of run the all the OKRs, and effectively take on some or many of the responsibilities that would previously be owned by a product manager because they're so fluent in data. I'd say similarly, a really strong analyst, like an analyst who is has a good sense of one of the revenue streams, like e-commerce, can really start owning some of the strategy, where in the past it would be owned by a kind of a business leader. Because they're so close to the data, they have a really good grasp of kind of the trends and also the business stuff. And I don't know where we're going to land. I think we're going to be somewhere in the middle, but we're going to have certainly in tech and tech development, product development, the roles are morphing, and you have like product leaders who are also designers and engineers who are, doing the design work, and also, the machine learning people doing product. I like everything's sort of morphing, where in the past we had very clear lanes. So in that kind of environment, it's important, like seniority really helps. And both kind of understand and work with stakeholders, senior stakeholders, but also be able to deal with these shifting responsibilities. And as it comes to junior folks, I think it's really hard right now. It's a really tough market, and I think like having a portfolio is really important. And I agree with what Rob said. Like having a good nuanced understanding of like AI capabilities, having some portfolio to showcase work, blogging or publishing about your work, maybe LinkedIn, not a blog. But that's really important for young talent in order to kind of get into some of these teams.
The
Piggybacking up
split.
your comment about like expanding scope for analysts, like for me, it's been more like full stack data science. And in like previous world, I would have an analytics engineering team and then maybe an analyst team that would hand off some of the BI, like the infrastructure work. And I think with AI, it's easier to do more for like full stack. And so for me, it's like one area or one pod owns an entire stakeholder set, whether it's the analytics engineering up through like predictive modeling. And they can stretch themselves more technically with that, like, yeah, being full stack versus having those handoffs, which are so costly.
So if
I'd say I think the other piece, it's this new kind of set of responsibility that may be owned by data or analytics teams. I don't know. I think the jury's out, but like understanding, basically like understanding the knowledge base of the business itself, like who um like effectively who takes on the librarian role for a company and make sure that information is organized well and accessible for agents, because it that information is as important and critical as the data, right, in order to put together kind of analyses and strategies, et cetera. And so I think there's this new interesting new area that's a bit of a kind of an in-between need. Data teams are really proficient at organizing information. So I think it's very, it makes sense for them to own this space, but it's not necessarily, what we've had to deal with in the past. Like like organize all this, the like the sales data and strategies, all or the kind of revenue team strategies, right? So I think there's a gap, emerging gap, and someone has to own this area.
And you want to have it be, I think that's something you need centralized too. Like my team is solving that within our like context layer for our like AI chat, right? But then potentially that's separate from what other people are using for context outside. So I do think having like one
Yeah, I
answer
don't
per
know.
company and who should like we're trying to figure that out. So
Yeah, I think question mark. There are
yeah.
pros and cons to centralization.
And in the world of data, we always talk about central decentralization. Like the pendulum always swings. We talk to someone, oh, analysts should be decentralized. Oh, no, I'm bringing them all together because it was getting too messy. And so we've always had that on the analytics side in general. And now here it's even morphing again. I think it's really interesting, what both of you guys are saying about, if we focus on the senior people for a second, they have work experience, they have experience working with the business, they have a broader understanding, hopefully, and they're able to morph into taking on more. So instead of being, building dashboards and writing SQL queries, they can bring forward all their experience and knowledge of the business, and that way evolve their role, and have that longevity in the workplace, that all of this offers, and really, expand in what they can do. So maybe if you think about it as a person listening to this webinar, think about what you can bring at a broader level, take on more stuff, adopt AI closely, use it as leverage, and just deliver a lot more value to the business so that you can maintain relevancy over time. If you're young, first of all, you're slightly screwed. I'm sorry, but they need to think about how to deal with that. But Rob, adopting AI tools very quickly, building a portfolio, showing what you're made of, right? For a potential hiring manager who's looking at you, the bar has gone up. You can't just finish college for 4 years and then go and find a job. You need to show what you're made of and what your potential value is to the business, and that will sort of unlock your ability to get into the workplace, accumulate experience, and then leverage that as the seniors are doing. Is that a correct summary of sort of what you guys are saying?
I
Yeah,
think
that's
it's
spot on.
fair. Yeah, I think like the networking is important. This is not about analytics, but there's so much AI noise in the recruiting process, and so finding a way to break out of the like submit your resume like mode. It's like building a network, and I think everything you're saying is a way to do that. But it's really important to find a personal connection versus just apply blind.
Yep. Yeah. By the way, it's because this is a call with so many, analysts and data people. The article I'm talking about, or the work I'm talking about, is full of these graphs. It's just literally it's tons and tons of data and graphs, etc. So I'm sure the data and analytics oriented people on this call would love to read through this, but it's also very, very interesting to see where the world is going, where the market's going. And this is updated as of about a week ago, on Stanford, on Stanford's website. Okay. So I know we're nearing towards the end here. I'm also monitoring. Oh, I need to stop sharing. I'm also monitoring the chat and the questions here. If you're now making sort of your final recommendations here, last couple sentences to a head of analytics, listen through this, and they know that they need to focus on the core first, and maybe they do use BI or maybe they don't. There's value here and there's value there. They need to upskill their team. They need to allow their seniors to take on more. There's a whole bunch of things that we talked about here. If you had to summarize it and say, okay, this is what you should think about coming off this webinar and considering actioning over the next few months, what would be that summary? Who wants to go first?
I can start. I mean, I would say I think finding a few key use cases that are manual, laborious, repetitive, right, for the data team. It could be around like data collection, it could be analysis, it could be reporting, right, recommendation. But like identifying a few a few clear use cases that currently take a meaningful amount of team resources, and really working through them. And I would say there aren't um, exact answers, right? Every team's trying to figure this out. So I think there are a bunch of choices and a lot of options out there. You can vibe code your way to a solution. You could buy into a third-party tool. But yeah, identify clear key use cases, figure out a solution. They're one out of many, and really kind of learn by doing. And learn about kind of like what's powerful, what's actually valuable, and what's right for your team. I'd say, yeah, start with some hands-on use cases. And I think it's impossible to put together like a 12-month strategy right now. So think of this as a 3 month note on a potential future strategy. That's
I
my
generally agree
that's my
that I think
recommendation.
finding if you want to start small, find that stakeholder who like you really trust and is a great partner for your data team, who has a lot of questions, and build out the metrics for that area, build out this like use case for that specific part of the business, because I think you can make a lot more progress if you have just a couple types of data you need to go after versus the entire like company. And then you can like iterate and make progress there. And I think we all just need to be like very comfortable with like the change and uncertainty, and just like constantly trying to like test and probe and evolve. It's just, yeah, things have changed way faster in the past, year than the like, 15 years, whatever I've been doing this. And it's fun, but it also like it's natural to feel uncertain. It's natural to be like scared when folks get their own numbers, and it's trying to like, get confidence in it, but be focused on the end goal of like helping make decisions faster and driving the business forward. There's not one right answer. You just have to like try and iterate and like have a good partner to work through that with.
Cool. So it's uh it's a tough time in some ways. It's very exciting, but also a tough time. Take on important problems, important to the business, tough problems even, hack at them, solve them, focus on the near term, delivering value, learn, understand that you're a part of a big group of people who are all learning at the same time. You know, on LinkedIn, everything looks rosy, everything looks amazing, everyone's having fun, everyone's building these crazy things. But between the three of us and the many, many people on this webinar, the reality is that we're all learning. We all are experiencing challenges. We're all learning to overcome them. Nothing is 100% rosy as it looks like on LinkedIn, and it's okay. And we're going to get through it together. And so with that, Gilad, Rob, I really appreciate your time today and the time of the many participants and the big audience that we had here. Um, Obviously, audience, you're welcome to follow both of them on LinkedIn, and see what else comes from them. But really, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm sure our audience really appreciates it, and it will be interesting to maybe do a touch base a year from now and see what we got right, what we got
We'll
wrong.
all be unemployed.
Cool. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Yoni.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, Rob.